audio and start recording. So if you want to go ahead and start, you can.
I'll do that. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Pinehurst Mayor John Strickland, and I'm calling to order a special meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council. This is February 8th, 2021, at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The purpose of the special meeting is to actually have a joint meeting with the Pinehurst Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Adjustment. And so I'm very happy to be co-chairing this meeting today with Cindy Burnett, who's the chair of the Planning and Zoning Board. At this meeting, we're all participating virtually. All council members are expected to be participating today and are present. All members of the Planning and Zoning Board, insofar as Cindy Burnett and I know, are present. And along with our key staff members, including Jeff Sanborn, our village manager, Darren Burke, head of planning, Alex Cameron, Kelly Brown from planning as well, and Natalie Hawkins, one of our assistant village managers for administration. We are a large group. I can see many of you on the screen right now. Hopefully, Cindy and I will be able to manage the where we proceed through our talking points that were circulated earlier that I hope you've had a chance to look at, or as other issues come up that you may want to discuss under different categories. We'll try to arrange to do so. I think if you will raise your hand, Cindy and I will note that you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, and we'll try to make sure we identify everybody accordingly. Potentially, we will have some technical difficulties. We already had at least one. So bear with the system as you go along. You can also call into the meeting if there are any technical difficulties with the picture or other things related to Zoom. Cindy and I, in planning this meeting, have spent quite a bit of time together. It's been wonderful to do that. I know we're all looking forward to an interesting interchange of views on a very wide variety of subjects. I think, Cindy, we also discussed the fact we'd like to keep the meeting to probably 90 minutes. So as we get to 5:30, we'll go on if needed, but probably a lot of the things we'll discuss today will need future follow-up, and I look forward to working on that with all the different parties involved here today. If I glance away from the screen from time to time, Cindy may be the same. It's only to check my agenda on another screen here and make sure I'm getting things along. So that I'm not playing chess or anything else on the side here. I think we've got some feedback from Jane's telephone, and I'm sure that Jason will resolve that momentarily. Cindy, you had some remarks you wanted to make. Would you want to make them before before we have the introductions of the council members and planning board members, or after that?
I prefer to do it after that.
After the introductions? Fine. Okay. Let me just stop here for a minute. Kevin, go ahead.
Not everyone hit mute.
Yeah, I think everyone but Cindy and I, if you could hit mute until the appropriate time, which will start just in a second with introductions, that would be great. So I'd like to just go around the introductions for the council members first. I've introduced myself, and I think I know all or most of you reasonably well on the planning board. Certainly a lot of the new names we're delighted to have and participate in this meeting today. I'll ask Judy Davis to identify herself and then go around to the other council members and proceed to the planning board through Cindy. Judy?
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Davis, and it's great to see you all a little bit closer than looking at you on the PNC videos. But thank you all for your service to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Kevin?
Kevin, I've been where you are. I know how tough a job you have. I think you have one of the toughest jobs of any committee. So thanks I'm happy we're together.
Lydia?
I am Lydia Bosch, and I'm one of the new people on Village Council, and I really enjoy watching your meetings. You guys are so thorough, and you are so dedicated, so I appreciate your service. And I'm really looking forward to a productive meeting today.
Thank you, Lydia. Jane?
Hi, Jane Hogeman, and I'm also new on the council, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to work more closely with the Planning and Zoning Board. It's such an important part of the whole framework and structure of governing Pinehurst, and I know it's going to be a lot of fun working together. I'm looking forward to it, and thank you all for joining us today and for all that you do.
Cindy, why don't I turn it over to you then now, and you can arrange the introduction to the planning board members.
Thank you, John, and council members. We are so excited to have this joint meeting with you and to get to know you better. I'm going to go in order as the way you show up on my screen. So Matt, you're the first one if you want to do a short introduction for the council.
Hello, Mayor and council members, and all my fellow new P&Z team members. Obviously, the newest member of the P&Z board, and excited to be serving the village. And have been, what an exciting time to jump in to have so much excitement going on, small area plans. So I'm learning a lot, and enjoyed catching up and continuing to catch up. So thanks for your patience with me as I get up to speed and try to give some helpful insights as I have them.
Thank you, Matt. Jeremy?
Hello, Mr. Mayor and Council. Jeremy Hooper. I've been on the Planning and Zoning Board since October 2018. I'm very thankful and privileged to be able to serve you as well as our village. Thank you for that opportunity. I'm particularly excited to be part of this meeting as well, to hear your views, direction, to make sure that we're aligned with that vision. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Julia?
Hi, Jules Latham. I'm on my second term on Planning and Zoning. I'm the second vice chair, and then on Board of Adjustment, I serve as the chair. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Jules. Jack?
This is Jack Farrell. I am happy to join everyone together, and I'm looking forward to a healthy exchange of ideas.
David? Thank you, Jack.
Everyone, David Alzamora. Feel like I'm still the new guy, but since I've been on, 2 new members have been appointed, so I'm not quite at the bottom of the totem pole. Just really enjoyed my time on the board so far, looking to learn more and work with everyone. Thank you.
David. And Philip, last but not least?
Yeah, Philip Shoemaker. I've been on the planning board for about a year and 3 or 4 months. Still have a lot to learn, and looking forward to hearing everyone's ideas tonight. So thank you, and great to see all the familiar faces.
Okay, and then we have, thank you, Philip. We still have Paul and Sonia, sorry. Paul? Can you hear me? You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry about that. I am, this is Paul Roberts, retired military. I'm on a defense contract right now, running on their satellite. So I've had to go to my phone since the government was saving money on their satellite. Been on the PNZ since fall of 18. Thoroughly enjoyed it, learned quite a bit, and have been, a resident of Pinehurst since 99. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Sonia?
Hi.
We can't see you, but we hear you.
Okay, let me see if I can change it. Nope. Do you still hear me? I'm sorry. Do you still hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for having the meeting as a joint meeting. Looking forward to working together and planning for the best for our wonderful village. And I had previous experience in planning and zoning and have had over a year with Pinehurst.
Thank you, Sonia. So what do you want to do next, John?
You had some comments I think you wanted to make, Cindy. This would be a time for that.
Okay, well, I am so excited that we are having this joint meeting, and I love that this council wants to get to know the Planning and Zoning Board and to work with us on the implementation of the 2019 comprehensive plan and updating the PDO. I'm very proud of this board. We are so lucky to have such an experienced and diverse group of professionals. And they introduced themselves, but they didn't really tell you a lot of their strengths. I mean, we have members with strong connections to the community, the military, the chamber, Moore County Home Builders Association, North Carolina Economic Development, the real estate market. And they have leadership experience and knowledge in civil engineering, stormwater management, the laws that surround the environment, real estate and zoning, how other planning boards operate, a history of Pinehurst and what is important to preserve, and of course, politics of government. So I think we've got a great group to move forward with on the projects that we have ahead of us. And the list that was attached to the agenda of the 2019 comprehensive strategies, I counted that 32 of the 52 strategies are listed in partnership with the P&Z board. So in 21 of those, of the 32, P&Z is the only partner listed with the planning department. So I feel we have a huge responsibility to this council and to the village staff and to the citizens of Pinehurst. And my hope is that this meeting will be the first step in developing some processes and tools to support these efforts efficiently and professionally. So thank you, John, for initiating this meeting.
Well, thank you for those comments, Cindy. Those were very well made. And I'd say the feeling is mutual among the council members. So we're very interested in working with the board. We know we have a lot of projects ahead of us, and the planning board is going to be a very key factor, as it always has been, to development around Pinehurst and trying to keep the ambiance of our village at the same time. So thank you for your commitment on those things. Moving along and looking at our talking points agenda here, we're sort of already to part number 3, and that had to do with training. And I think this is one of the key elements of the reason to have this discussion today. I think going back several months, Cindy, when you and I were talking about getting the boards together, one of the ideas and issues was training. And I want to state from the council's point of view, and I think some of the other council members will want to elaborate a little bit, that we're very much in favor of all kinds of training that's appropriate for the board to have. As I've mentioned in the talking points, it seemed to me that there's sort of formalized training from sources like the School of Government and the League of Municipalities. But I think there's also some training on the history of Pinehurst and Frederick Law Olmsted and things related to that will be helpful to the board on an ongoing basis as well. So we look forward to arranging or having you arrange those things with Darren and the planning department. And I'm pretty sure Darren and Alex already know the formalized training availability, and they'll obviously be working on that. I think that there are a couple of council members who might wish to make a comment on that, and we'll take any questions back about training and move on from there. But Judy, did you have any comment particularly on the training aspects that you would like to pass along today?
I don't, but in listening to one of the recent P&Z meetings, I heard people extolling Jack Farrell's latest publication of the history of Pinehurst and things like that. So I think that you should feel aggressive in terms of approaching Cindy as well as Darren on resources that you want access to and training that you think would be appropriate. So definitely speak up and let us know of things that you find that are useful and relevant.
Yeah, good. And I know that I think Jane may have a couple comments on training, and then we'll move on to any questions about that back from the planning board. But Jane, did you have some particular thoughts on training you wanted to pass on today?
Well, one thing I would say about it is, at least in my experience, it's possible to receive some training, to learn some stuff, and while you're sitting there learning it, it all seems great and sounds like, well, I understand this, and then as soon as you get up and drive away, you forget all about it. And it's helpful to be able to look at things from several different viewpoints, the same thing from several different ways. And so if there's school of government films or school of government books, but also to review our own PDO when different applications come along, just to take another look at what's in there. And every time you sort of see something different and realize what it means in a different context, it's helpful for me.
Thank you.
That's all. Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. Cindy, would there be any questions back about training? I mean, this is an obvious advantage of being on the board with the resources we have, but go ahead, Cindy.
One comment that I would like to make to the board members, I had suggested earlier going through sections 8 and 9 just to review those. And in further conversations with Darren and Alex, I think it would be good just to flip through the pages and look at the different sections, but don't really start working on it. I think we're going to narrow that down and come back with something a little bit more manageable. So I just wanted to update that. And then are there other members that would like to ask a question or make a suggestion? Just raise your hand, be the easiest. I don't see any hands. So okay. I agree with everything.
Somebody's waving there in the middle. Jack.
Yeah, this is Jack Farrell. I looked up the School of Government, and it appears that the online learning tools and the e-learning libraries available to municipalities at no charge. However, they have to be identified as being a member of the league's property and liability risk management pool. And are we, in fact, Jeff Sanborn may know this, are we a part of the league's property and liability risk management pool?
Yes.
Yes, we are, Jack.
So these learning e-library courses would be available at no charge to any member who's on the planning and zoning board. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's correct. Can I just share my screen quick?
Please, Darren. Yeah, you may have a whole list of possibilities.
Well, I think I just want to share what I think Jack was just looking at. And can you see this UNC School of Government Planning Development Regulation? That one? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so Jack, this might have been what you're looking at, but I'll send you all this link. This shows what the different types of school of government trainings are available for planning development. So what Jack was just talking about was that on-demand training. It's those modules that are available, and we need to refresh that and get that out to you. Then they have regional workshops, and I actually clicked on this, and there's a regional workshop coming up in May around the state, and that's on quasi-judicial. So that's one coming up. Then they have direct training. So they have direct training where school government officials will come out to you and do trainings on land use law and planning. It says here it's about 1 to 3 hours, and that costs about $1,500. I was told that we might have done this previously, and we've invited other towns to join in to share some of that cost. So that's another one. If there's something specific that we want to talk about and bring somebody out from the School of Government, that's a potential. So that has a cost implication, of course. And then publication for boards. Now these are something that we give out to all new board members. That's that quasi-judicial handbook and that introduction to zoning and development regulation. I don't know how long we've been doing that, so we're going to have to do a poll because I think Paul didn't get one. So I'm not sure how many members don't have these books. So we'll circle back and find out who doesn't have these books, and we'll get them out to you. And that's all I have to talk about in that regard. I will say that last year I was looking at our agendas from last year, and I think, Alex, we had two or three different types of training at planning and zoning sessions. So I don't have that one in front of me right now. But we did hold some trainings last year, and that's all I got.
Darren,
This is Jack again. Just one comment. Can you share with us through either Cindy or the staff the logistics of if we wish to take some of these online training tools, what codes we have to use or the logistics of that? That would be helpful in the future. Not right now, but in the future, just send that off to us.
Great, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Can I add a little bit to what Darren just was stated and some of those other resources were shared? So, Jack, I know you're one of our newest members that went through the new onboarding process, but I do actually provide a handout that has the link access to those online modules as well as our login information for those. Furthermore, the School of Government, some of the courses that Darren showed, that one that's coming up in the spring, every spring they do offer those learning courses, and they alternate every year based on if they're going to focus more on the quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing process or more on the legislative. And they typically hold 4 of those sessions because they try to spread it out in all areas of the state, from the mountains to the coast and the Piedmont in between. Obviously, last year, COVID hit, so they canceled those. And because of COVID and somewhat of how we're having to conduct this meeting now, last year we did have a lull and being able to provide some training. But some of our more experienced P&Z members, like Julia, Cindy, maybe recall, staff is able to do a better coordinated effort. Jack may help your question for that. And, some of it is you can do some homework on your own, but it does provide a little bit better opportunity and maybe just get to Jane's point a little bit into actually applying the information that you learn. I held a session, I believe it was in 2018, and invited members of P&Z, BOA, as well as HBC members. And we did a focus on quasi-judicial training and conducting evidentiary hearings, facts versus not facts, your standards of review. And, I played on some of the information's in there. Mayor Strickland, you may also recall, I think, back in 2018, I did one of these sessions for P&Z, and you actually attended in the audience. Jane, you may have been there as well. So, staff can kind of take the opportunity to go those modules and host everyone over and, play devil's advocate a little bit. Okay, well, you see this scenario play in front of you. How about, back this past spring and summer when the Village Chapel came through its legislative process for rezoning and how you can apply the conditions, how they came about. We just haven't really had as good an opportunity because of COVID. But Matt, I think you were our most recent volunteer to come through the onboarding process. So I hope I didn't misspeak, and I hope I did provide you with those links. But as the topics arose, we can definitely get ready to set something up and make a work session and put everybody together, or however we can, whether it be this platform or not. And Darren is right. I believe it was just before I came on too. The village did host sort of the School of Government folks to come down, do a session, and all the local municipalities were invited, and they're appointed, and I think maybe some of their elected officials as well. So they're a great resource, and there's some even updated modules based on some of the changes that are implemented with Chapter 160D.
very helpful, Alex. As we're going through this, and Darren and Alex have just spoken, I'm reminding myself that I overlooked one of my own opening notes here, and that was not only to introduce the planning board and the council, but to introduce the staff, although their faces and activities are pretty well known across the board. Now, we've heard from Darren and Alex, but Jeff Sanborn, would you like to make a greeting? And then I think Natalie, and then we'll go back to Kelly. Jeff?
Thanks, John. I'm Jeff Sanborn. Hi. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I hope we can make some hay here. And I'll turn it over to Natalie.
I'm Natalie Hawkins. Hi. And maybe we can get a hay bale made after the end of today.
Kelly?
Kelly's not present right now. I think she's left it to Beth. She's getting HPC packet credit.
There you go. Okay. A staff member at work. That's good to know too, right? All right, we'll carry on then. So I think on the training, we all understand and everybody's agreed this is important. We want to make those resources available to the planning board, and the council really endorses that for the planning board, the HPC, and certainly for ourselves as well as we go forward. I think, Cindy, if you agree, we can move on to item number 4. And
John, could I jump in here before we leave the training topic?
Please, please.
I'd just like to say that from the management standpoint, what we're really interested in longer term is building a system, something that's systematic. In other words, we want to engage you in this conversation about training with the eye toward creating something that does more than just scratch today's itch, but builds a system that makes sure that we're meeting tomorrow's needs as well.
You know, Jeff, that's extraordinarily important. And I think when I was discussing the plans for this meeting with Cindy or maybe the other council members, it occurred to me that what you have done and this other senior staff to set up this onboarding process for all employees and all divisions of village government is right to the point that you just made about having this sort of training be a system and kind of run itself over time. So that's wonderful. I think we all endorse that for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, seeing the onboarding checklist that Darren goes through the new members with now is 1,000 times better than what I had when I was onboarded. So well done. Kevin?
Yeah, all I was saying is I kind of enjoy bringing someone down, that 15, I like to invest in the planning zoning board. And there's something about, when we get to go up to Chapel Hill, the School of Government, we get to talk with among ourselves, how we interpret it. We get to look at each other when things we didn't understand. We get to talk to each other and ask it again, to the instructor. I like the idea of investing right now in someone coming down. I don't know the logistics when it's convenient or if they do it because of COVID, but it just seems like perfect timing for something like that. And I know you want to do the modules, great. I think you should do those too, but I'd like to see a human coming down and directly dealing with the issues, the questions you have, and investing in you right now in you guys. That's all I'm at.
Good. Good.
I'll echo what Kevin said, and I also like the part about having somebody down and having Aberdeen and Southern Pines attend as well as our team. So I think it broadens that perspective because, we're all separate jurisdictions, but there's, more we all understand all the issues that are pressing in each of our locales.
Yeah. My question is, what doesn't the Historic Commission still have to abide by our PDO? Wouldn't they learn from this a little bit?
Oh yeah, I think a lot of
should they be invited does that make any sense, Jeff, or not?
Well, the HPC has regulations that are unique to the historic.
They're above.
They don't abide by the PDO. The HPC is charged with one thing, and it's a congruence test, as you well know. So, it's all about the standards and applying that congruence test. So, it is true to say that the HPC guidelines are an extension of the PDO, but they don't operate otherwise in the same construct. Now, certainly they have to understand how to operate in a quasi-judicial environment because that's the world they live in.
Okay.
But many of the other things that a planning and zoning a person would need to know, an HPC person might not necessarily need to know.
Yeah. Okay. Cindy, I think we should move on to item number 4. And my remarks to that would be that kind of as I put in the talking points here, we we would be welcoming the idea that as the Planning and Zoning Board goes through its processes of reviewing applications, that as you see issues of concern or issues that seem not to be clear, that you red flag these sort of things and work with the staff as you are now and red flag them and point them out to the council, because we'll be receiving these same applications over time. And in talking with Kevin a bit on this point, he being a former member of the planning board as well as on the council, Kevin had a bit of a view of how this could work and some of his experiences on that. So I'd like to ask Kevin if he would make a few comments about the process of reviewing applications and pointing out issues to the council as they go along.
I don't know. I don't remember exactly our conversation. I just meant when I served on it, I was like with Cindy, you know, I got some training, but I could have used some more. But I think what we discussed is if you run into issues and you think there's something that we need to fix, tell us. I mean, two-way communication. If you think there's something we need to fix, and we might not be able to fix it, you know, it might be just, but I think that was the simplicity of it, John. Would you agree with that? It was just, what, or would you want to elaborate more on it? I just meant, if you're having a problem, we're having a problem. Your problem is our problem, you know, and I don't know if when I served on it, if I fully recognized that, you know, that if I'm having an issue, you know, it's an issue for the council. So you should help us help you, is I guess is really the simplicity of what I was trying to say.
Can you provide clarity? I know there was some discussion about quarterly updates to the PDO. Were those updates for us to provide you with those comments and that feedback that we notice as we're working on projects or submittals? Or what exactly were you thinking?
I think I was saying that specifically. I was just saying, if you run into a problem, you feel like there's some ambiguity, you know, that maybe you tell us about it.
Okay.
Ambiguous. I'm more in a position that we need to support you, not the other way. We need to do everything possible to support you guys. That's kind of my position. And I thought if you're running into problems, and there's something that you see as ambiguous, maybe that needs to be fixed. That's all I know.
Okay.
So it's
Can
more.
I jump in on that? I think I saw a suggestion, I don't know where it came from recently, that as the Planning and Zoning Board reviews applications and makes recommendations, sends that to council, maybe there's an opportunity for you, to strike while the iron's hot, while it's fresh in your mind, and add, maybe there's a specific section on recommendations about things that were troubling to you about the language in the PDO that you were forced to interpret that made your efforts to grapple with that application difficult. And I think that, I haven't talked to Darren or Natalie about that, but I think that's a good idea. I mean, it's kind of again, going back to being systematic, it's a way to help us all work together to create a better document.
Can I jump on that too? I think that while the iron's hot is a good thing to do, because as you're going through the process, you see some of the weaknesses. And I was thinking about that today, how to get some of our arms around that. And I thought part of it is potentially doing an analysis of the previously approved conditions on development approvals, because the conditions that we're putting on those development approvals via some of those conditions, they show where there might be some weaknesses in our ordinance that we might want to look at and say, hey, can we elevate it here? I've seen a couple developments come through recently where we've required a 10 to 20-foot landscape buffer around the perimeter of a subdivision development. So maybe things like that, looking at some of those previous conditions are another place to look at where we might have some weaknesses in our PDO.
And just to elaborate, what we do, one of the things that we did with the historic guideline update is we recognized it wasn't updated for 5 years or whatever. And so we encouraged the Historic Commission to come to us yearly, so we could fix it and not turn into the project it was that Judy and I and Jack and who else on this call spent, 2 years of our life on. But I mean, so I think it's consistent with what we said to the Historic Commission. Would you guys agree with that?
Can I jump in also a little bit?
Let's asking Jeff first. Is that consistent with?
Go ahead, Jeff, and then Jane.
Jeff first. Is that consistent with what we kind of said to the Historic Commission?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
Jane, go ahead.
Thanks. The county Board of Commissioners quarterly receives a list of PDO tweaks, or not PDO, Moore County Development Ordinance tweaks. And they do it that way on a systematic basis. Their planning staff are always combing through looking for amendments that need to be made and so forth. And because the PDO, updating the PDO is a very big priority, both in the comprehensive plan and in our 5-year plan. I floated that in a couple of conversations as one approach to tackling it. And it turns out that that's probably not the way to overhaul the entire PDO. But the other side of it is, in this first year of being on the council and having a certain number of zoning applications presented to us, some of them have been administrative applications. And administrative applications, neither the Planning and Zoning Board nor the council has any discretion. It's just a matter of determining whether the application meets the black and white standards of the PDO. And so you start to wonder, well, why are we bringing these to a public hearing? And I think one reason that we do it is so that the public can see what's going on and see what's happening. It has an opportunity. But the other reason I think is important is that when there's an application before you, when you're looking at a real application, instead of just scrolling through the text of the PDO, all of a sudden it stands the PDO up and walks it around, and you get a much better understanding of how all the different parts of it fit together. So in making those administrative reviews, keeping an eye open for what you see that makes you scratch your head and ask, why are we doing something this way? Or why aren't we looking at such and such an aspect of things? And to make a note of those questions that come up when you see the PDO in action, so that we can then, as we do a more comprehensive update of the PDO, fold those issues in and make sure that going forward, we're doing a better job.
Yeah, that's helpful. Lydia, I think you might have also some comments on this idea of receiving applications and marking red flags. But then after that, Cynthia, let's get questions back from your board members. But Lydia, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. Something that comes to mind, and I don't know if it's doable, but there's sometimes we'll see applications that have come from you guys, And some of them are more high profile than others. And on some of the really high profile stuff, it helps me to go out and actually walk a site. You know, staff does a great job of the documents they give us for review. But if you can go walk the site and actually put your feet, Jane said your feet and your eyes, if you can put your feet and your eyes on the ground and look at it that way, I think it enables you to maybe see things a little differently and maybe come to us with recommendations that you possibly wouldn't have seen if you'd only looked at documents. So I just, as you know, as we're having this discussion, that's come to mind because it's really helped me to go out and actually see the projects.
Great.
Is that doable for you guys?
Cindy?
Yeah, we do that. And Alex came up with the idea, we now have a badge saying with our picture on it, saying that we're part of planning and zoning. So we can wear that when we go out and look at someone's property and we don't look like we're trespassing quite as badly.
Yeah. I didn't have that. I was going to get shot a couple times, so I didn't have that when I served.
Go ahead, Cindy. Go ahead.
I noticed Julia had her hand up. Do you have something you want to say?
Just a few things. Yes, we do go walk the sites, and Cindy and I have had some fun field trips together. So that has been part of our process. In piggybacking on what Jane had said in regard to the feedback that that they receive at the county level, of course, pointing out, I think the obvious that our staff is certainly most familiar and really expert at navigating our PDO. And so making sure that whatever work we do is in concert with their uniquely valuable feedback. You know, that of course somewhat goes without saying, but really can't be overlooked because I know at the P&Z level, we rely on their expertise all the time. And then reiterating, I think you all are already aware that P&Z has flagged section 8.5 and also 9.7 as being areas that we know we need to take a look at. That would be the golf course setbacks in 8.5, and then the signage regulations in 9.7. Signage has just been an ongoing issue and one that is made more complicated and fun by the U.S. Supreme Court and our friends in Raleigh. So to a certain extent, our hands are tied in determining how far we can get or at what speed, but that remains something that is outstanding. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia. And I noticed Natalie has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what Jeff Sanborn just said in terms of, you know, the importance of making it a systematic process of identifying those changes that you see. And to his point, I think you're better off doing that right when you're looking at the applications, because that's when it's fresh and not letting it go aside. So I wanted to suggest, an idea that you guys might want to consider, which is you could put a standing agenda item at the very end of every agenda that says, let's just do a quick review. Is there any section of the PDO that came up when we were reviewing applications in this meeting that we need to look at? And then that would be a way to at least prompt yourself to ask the question every time you're looking at an application.
Thank you, Natalie. I know that Alex and Darren have their PDOs marked up and have a lot of areas that they want to look at. So I think I would rather they talk about this, and then if any of the members have comments or questions to follow after their input. Darren or Alex?
Yes, Alex, you can jump in here too, but you're right. We have a number of items that need to be updated with that PDO. And as Jane had said, the county does. They go through a systematic process where they're doing some maintenance type of updates. We could certainly do something like that And in order for us to get there, and Alex and I were just talking about this today, and we have been talking about this for a while, we need to actually start create a matrix. Natalie's got me into creating matrices for everything. And I've got to create a matrix to start working on this, and we got to share it with the board. And I think we started working on it. I actually started working on it today, Alex and I have to share my screen. Well, we're gonna try and share something with the P&Z, the first meeting in March. And it's really, we're gonna start listing out all those items kind of in the PDO that staff has actually identified as needs. And then we'll start talking about that with the P&Z, and we'll probably we'll end up going beyond that. And then we'll start to see what the what can we get done within the short run? What are some of the ones that, as Jana said, are protective or will help preserve us? And what are some of the ones that are more comprehensive? Because there are a lot of comprehensive needs. Something like, I think we need to do a whole new chapter, like Julia said, on signage. Signage needs to come out and be its own chapter. Subdivision regulations, they need to be their own chapter. So those are things that are more comprehensive in nature. They need to get done. But there are other things like, Alex, jump in. What are ones that we need done right now?
Okay, so just in the time from our conclusion of our TRC meeting this afternoon until getting ready for this meeting, so that was maybe 55 minutes, I started putting into the Word document or the matrix that Darren started to create today. And I've got 11 already in there. Again, I just had to stop before getting ready for the meeting. So, I mean, they could be, our watershed regulations need to better mirror the updated criteria that's with the state right now. Yeah, we got off-street parking requirements. We got alternate spacing parking requirements, how parking spaces are designated, like wheel stops or covered with curb and gutter, depending on the location. Table of dimensional requirements that can kind of be lumped in with some of the golf course setback. And there's some better language for encroachments that could be made for decks, patios, etc. Our exterior lighting standards need to be really, really updated. They're atrocious to try to administer from a staff perspective, not to mention they need to be brought into current terminology. As I've been told that full cutoff, non-cutoff, 90-degree cutoff, that language is pretty well being phased out. Some of our accessory uses and our SRs or special requirements in section 8.6 could be better clarified. So that's just a small list that I put together in about 15 minutes that Darren and I will be adding many to. But yes, the subdivision regulations, that could check several boxes if that is comprehensively updated. So just keep that in mind. And that could also include changes in the process that they're reviewed, especially major subdivisions that Jane was just talking about. You guys may recall some email communication from me back in August of last year when we were going through the first administrative review that you guys had, it requiring a public hearing for an administrative review where you're checking boxes and black or white design standards that you have to apply to. It's problematic, but to that point, that is a very good time to expose some lagging issues that you have in your development ordinance based on the feedback you hear from the public. So those are just a few that I've already identified in a short time this afternoon.
Cindy, it occurs to me that this discussion might be a good segue now to move into another one of the topic areas here, and that has to do with what kind of committees can we have, what works, what doesn't work, and efficient use of planning board members' time. And Jeff Sanborn has been very helpful, along with Darren and Mike Newman, in kind of reminding us about how committees can work and can't work. But it does seem that we're kind of in a little conundrum of the board wanting to take up some responsibility and look into some of these aspects of the PDO and other things such as Alex had just mentioned, but it's hard to find a way to do that. You and I talked about a couple of ways that might happen in work sessions and all, but I'd like to hear more from your board members if they'll have questions about this or ideas on how we can meet under the guidance that Jeff has provided.
Well, I'm muting myself. I think it would be good for you to explain, or Jeff to explain the guidelines that we need to follow, because I don't think all the board members fully understand that. And then we can move forward with their comments. Jeff, do you mind doing that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And this is kind of complicated, so bear with me. But what we're talking about, and there's no prohibition on anybody ever working together on things, but what we're talking about is when the state's open meetings law comes into play and what that means in terms of scheduling and coordinating. You can kind of summarize it this way. Anytime there's a group that is either formally or informally appointed or formed that includes either at least one elected member of the local government, or one of the appointed board members that those elected members appoint, then anytime such a group or subcommittee or what have you meets, and there's at least a quorum of that group present, the meeting is subject to open meetings law, which means it has to be noticed. It has to be open to the public. It has to be a place that the public knows they can come and observe the meeting, and so on. So I only, I've raised this point just from that standpoint. Logistically, it gets more difficult to do that type of a thing than, for example, for whatever reason, the state government thinks it's okay for staff to work behind closed doors and come up and work on the same thing. But once you involve at least one appointed board member or one elected official, the open meetings law comes into play. Is that understandable?
I have one question. So if you say set up a subcommittee to work on, PDO updates, and it is known that they're going to meet the second Tuesday of every month, and that's the standard time and the standard place, does it also have to be advertised in the newspaper 2 weeks ahead of time, or can it just be, this is the regular meeting date, if you want to attend, you're welcome, and the agenda be posted on the website?
I think that all is required is it be that standard that you're calling attention to be posted somewhere, like on our website.
And that would be
accessible to the public.
Okay, and that would qualify.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Jeff or Cindy, if the working committee or subcommittee working on PDO issues were an appendage after a regular planning and zoning meeting, then the notification for the planning and zoning meeting could just say that there will be a follow-on meeting of the working group. So in other words, you could schedule at least once a month, assuming that there's no lengthy public hearing involved. You could have a working group session appended to the back of a normal planning and zoning meeting, and that could serve as the public notice. Is that correct, Jeff?
I think that would work, yes.
Okay.
There are some lengthy public hearings coming up, just as an FYI.
I have to be excused for just a second. I got the notice that my computer's about to go to sleep. I didn't look at the, so I'm just going to go get my charge cord. I'll be.
Okay, all right. We're carrying on from that. Are there some questions or comments on any of these thoughts in item number 4 from members of the Planning and Zoning Board? And if you'll wave your hand, I'll try to find it. Judy, I see you're waving your hand. Why don't you go ahead, and then I'd love to hear from some of the planning board members. Judy?
Yeah. Well, I wondered, could we go about this a different way? So we have a bike and pedestrian committee. We have a beautification committee. These are sort of advisory boards that aren't really attached to any other particular group. Could you have a group, a citizen board that is concerned about planning and zoning, that aren't members of the P&Z, but are really maybe somewhat of a staff support to the staff, that let's take signage, that somehow they have enough knowledge to work on this? I mean, is that a group that could be formed and be useful? And use it as almost as a bench for your planning and zoning future commissioners.
Yeah, I think it can work. And I mean, to me, the cleanest way to do that is to have an informal group like that is formed by the staff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those,
One of
can
the,
I add that those meetings like Judy referred to, those are still also public meetings, those committees.
Right.
As they're formed?
Yes.
Right. Was that Kelly?
It's Beth.
That was Beth.
Beth. I'm sorry. Oh, Beth, I forgot you were there too.
And Jeff, whatever you said at the end dropped off, so I didn't quite catch what your response was.
I'm sorry, Judy, was that directed at me?
Yes, Jeff Sanborn. Whatever your answer was to that, part of it got cut off, so I just couldn't hear it all.
Yeah, I was just suggesting that it's that such an approach like that is much cleaner and easier to implement if it's an informal group like that that's called together by the staff.
Okay. I think too on this idea of Judy's, but it could apply in other ways as well, on call it committee work or project work, and how to use the time efficiently of the planning board members. Maybe it's unusual, but at the moment we have in our files, I think 6 or so applications for appointments to the planning board into the future with people who have recently applied. And it seems to me that some of those folks, after having been interviewed by staff and Cindy and whatnot, some of those folks might be able to populate some of these other volunteer committees and working with staff, working with planning board members as a way for them to see how the planning board work goes and for them to become known better to the village staff, potentially the village council, and certainly the planning board. So that group of volunteers is also present to work with planning board members, I think, into the future on this. But what other questions are coming from members of the planning board or comments or on this point, if any, right now? I'm looking at the screen trying to see who's waving.
Did she go for that comment? Did she hear what you said, John?
Who, Cindy?
Yeah.
Yeah, since you've not talked about that on the volunteers.
We've talked about that, and I think that's a great idea. I'm concerned about the time commitment for the P&Z members and, how much extra time they would have to devote to a subcommittee, depending on how much work is involved. And I was hoping that some of these other citizens that have interest in planning and zoning or council could serve on these committees and take some of the workload off from the P&Z members. But I'll let them, speak to that themselves.
I have a concern that the expertise is on the planning and zoning board, not on these new citizens. And so you're literally giving them an important topic and they don't have the experience you have. So I'm a little concerned about that.
I think that's a good point, Kevin. I would just say that as I've looked at a couple of the resumes we have, these are people who've served on planning boards in other places, so they would need to be updated on North Carolina law potentially or others. But, they're generally people who've had experience working on planning boards, boards of adjustment in other places, and maybe there's a fit for some and not a fit for others. And clearly there would be planning board members potentially involved anyway. But yeah, that's a good point on credentials, important to have. Cindy?
Yeah, I think that's true, Kevin. And I just would think that maybe if you got people with enough background, this would be a good way to get them oriented and spin them up a little bit faster to whenever there's an opening to serve on the P&Z board.
Matt, I think you had your hand up as well.
Thanks. So I have one concern and one suggestion. So I like what you're saying about helping to build the bench for future P&Z members, and that makes sense. But my concern would be, I guess, creating another team that the staff has to also manage or lead, like they are kind of already doing with planning and zoning board. And their time. And then my suggestion is, in talking to Alex some and him sharing the list, is if staff has some areas that are targets in the PDO to be updated, then maybe, we just kind of take our cues from there as to, what we target. So maybe, we take bite-sized pieces of a list and we give ourselves a reasonable time frame of we want to work towards something. And because especially as a new person, I know the staff is certainly more familiar, but I feel like a part of the commitment to the board is doing some of that additional research. It's not just the time at the meetings. So I feel like that's a good use of time for us to support the staff, and also when you research those things, you're better equipped to review submissions as they come in. So I think it helps on both ends.
Good point, Matt. Jeremy, I see your hand up.
It's kind of to piggyback what Matt was just saying, and I had written down here, for me, it's really about clarity towards what we're targeting and maybe a timeline. I know that the staff's been very, very helpful to do that for us, but coming from council also may be important for us to hear, maybe some targets that you guys would like us to implement, a time frame to do that. I know there's going to be a lot coming up. And as a lot of those changes happen and we rewrite a lot of the PDO and make it more effective for us, to kind of piggyback Jeff Seymour's point, some sort of a systematic process that allows us to tweak these PDO changes and others that we may need to maybe become more important for us to implement as a lot of changes come at once and over a short period of time. I just think that may be important for some sort of process to help those if we implement them very quickly. And then on Natalie's point earlier, have an idea about some sort of a, kind of a highlighted point at the end of our meetings. There has been times where I've wanted to discuss something that I may not have felt was germane to the actual applicant or the application, but it may have been a PDO definition on how it could relate. So I think that opportunity for me, I've looked for that opportunity. How do I ask that maybe to the group? So that would be very, very helpful for me.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Paul, I saw your hand up.
I would ask, maybe go back and look at the last 12 months. What were the desires? What were the expectations of tasks to be accomplished, and whether or not they were or they were not accomplished? And then looking at the next 12 months, what goals need to be accomplished? And then once you identify that, is there sufficient time, one meeting a month, to accomplish those goals? Do we need to take goals off, or do we need to allocate more time? I would assume that with a new time standard of 9 months applied to the moratorium, there's going to be a set number of accomplishments that need to be accomplished prior to the end of that 9 months. So, have we backward planned and laid that out, on what the expectations are of the P&Z and what are the tasks to be accomplished within those timelines?
Yeah, that's an organized approach. Thank you, Paul.
Well said.
Very well. Anyone else?
I'll just jump in. It sounds like and hitchhike on Jeremy's comments. It's almost like P&Z needs a work session, on some kind of frequency, whether that's once a month or once every other month or something, so that you can talk about the, topical things that whether whether it's a particular ordinance or not a particular ordinance, but a particular provision of like signage or some other thing that you want to try and tackle, and taking that list of 11 that Alex has already come up with and saying how you might be, what's the research needs behind this that we need to get done.
And Darren and Alex have offered that as well. Alex, I see your hand up. You want to address?
Yeah, if I could. I don't want to certainly diminish or knock any idea of having the opportunity for some citizens who have already shown some interest in maybe serving on the Planning and Zoning Board and serving the community. It would still, though, seem that there would have to be some sort of a selection process for those folks that are in the queue to determine who would want to or who staff would think would be the most fitting to give us a hand. So there'd be some sort of selection process. What kind of training or onboarding would staff need to do, even though they may or may not have some experience in how they handle that? So if we're treating them the same as we are one of our already 9 selected folks, just to maybe circumvent or a way to get around having a official meeting or a public body, there's a reason why you got 9 of you are selected here. And I know folks like Matt, who are brand new, are just eager to just sink his teeth into many of these PDO updates. And, earlier last year, Darren may recall when looking up the list, another matrix he was working on. When we didn't have lengthy public hearings, our doors weren't quite getting beat down with public hearing requests or other applications. We had a standing update on upcoming future P&Z items, or we can put some sort of agenda item in there that, if time allows, let's have a working group. Okay, guys, where did we pick up from last week? Last week we were talking about exterior lighting, and at that meeting, at the conclusion of the P&Z meeting, Cindy asked Matt to go check out what the town of Southern Pines is doing. Jack, go check out town of Matthews, and then we can come back. We're not always going to have lengthy public hearings, although we do expect some very soon. So there's going to be some downtime, and if we keep that as an option every month, staff will be able to identify, because of our lengthy notice requirements for a public hearing. We'll know a couple of weeks ahead of time whether or not we're going to have something on the agenda or not. And that will, if we don't, that gives Darren and I plenty of time to start getting some things together, and Cindy to communicate with you, and you can go ahead and send out homework assignments within those 2 weeks heading up to the meeting. Then we're there in a duly advertised or noticed meeting, and we get to sink our teeth in it a little more, and council has the ability to, live stream and see what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alex, what I'm hearing too from this is that there certainly is a desire on the part of the planning board to engage in some work session process, as Judy has suggested, or other way to meet and to handle some of these tasks. And there are a lot of them to be looked into. You've got your list of 11. I put a few ideas here in the talking points having to do with focus area 5 and OP zoning, and potentially focus area 5 and 3 actually, and watershed district policy, all these sort of things which have been discussed around in recent weeks. But I think the takeaway on this part of the agenda is we need to find what that right mix is, and working with planning and Jeff and everybody, and I think we can find a way to do that, to fashion a way to look at projects, come up with solutions, go on to the next one, that sort of thing. How do you see it, Cindy?
I think we have one more comment from Sonia. It looks like she wants to say something before we.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Thank you. I totally agree with the work sessions, and we have had some work sessions after meetings, but I'm just throwing this out to see what y'all think. I know with the 5 and 3 areas, we talked about the moratorium, and I brought that up way back, and the answer was council's working on it. Council may be working on it. I think there was kind of, and I'm not blaming anybody or trying to stir up anything, there was a disconnect there. And I know I've gotten many questions in the community from people, well, why didn't y'all stop this development on 5? Why are you allowing that? And I think we need to have a little bit more communication there. And I think with Cindy working with Mayor Strickland and the Village Council, I think we will get that. But I just wanted to point that out so that we can see that we are studying things, but we're not getting some of the things back from council or answers, questions that we have. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else got a hand up on this part of the agenda?
Kevin's got his up, I see.
Kevin?
Yeah, I'm kind of repeating the same thing every time, but when we build the system, when I was on there, I felt like I didn't know that I had the ability to communicate back to the council. And I think what we're finding is we want to change, and we want to make sure that what Sonia said never happens again. Like the communication, there's a way for you to communicate to us, but you're going to talk to me about code. I mean, obviously Alex and Darren are better, but I'm talking from a 20,000 foot level. I hope our new system protects us from that happening again. We are there to support you, and you're part of it. And I would even throw this, as we rethink on all our committees and how to make you feel more, everybody feel more part of it. I'm not sure that you shouldn't have been there when we picked the small area plan people. Maybe not, but I mean, that's kind of how I think maybe you should have been there, after the fact, obviously hindsight's 2020, but I don't really, I just think we ought to just rethink this thing, but we got to make sure we don't go so far that you're smothered, that you're an independent body to serve independently. So we got to do this, but not smother you. And I think that's the challenge. And I think the distance that you felt, Sonia, was probably by design because you're a separate body and you have your own independent from the council. But so it's a balancing act that we're going to need staff's help to figure out how to give you an avenue to communicate with us. And I think what I see is if you communicate with us at a 20,000 foot level, when Darren comes to us with a problem, hey, yeah, we heard that from members of the Planning and Zoning Board. And it gives us the ability to relate directly to the nuts and bolts stuff that Alex and Darren are telling to us.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. But then again, I want to make sure you're an independent body. You're not there to do what we tell you. You're there to be an independent body. And so I just think that's the challenge, Sonia. And I'm sorry you had that experience, but I understand it because I served on it. But I would love to have an avenue to communicate. Maybe that's what the quarterly thing is. Communicate to us quarterly at a 20,000 foot level, because obviously the detail answers come from staff, but and how can we not surprise you on stuff? I think I've heard some people being surprised by things they should have been surprised about, but that happened. So, but we're trying to fix that in all our committees and build a system. And I just wanted to, it's kind of the same, I'm saying the same thing differently each time, but that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I'd like to move on, but I do also want to raise the question that I know Cindy and I had discussed that many of you might have had in your mind on the planning board, and that is, do you have any questions that you'd like to address tonight on the moratorium or the small area plans that I think that had been in the minds of some of the members of the planning board? There's obviously been a lot of publicity about that.
Something happened.
Yeah, John froze there, but I think everybody got the gist of his question. Does anybody have anything?
Well, Paul had his hand up before that John started off too, so maybe go to Paul.
Yeah, real quick, and it doesn't directly address the mayor's questions, but one of the things I think I've been challenged with is, and I always ask two questions every time Alex presents a plan, but we have the PDO, which is statutory. We've got the comp plan, which is regulatory. So one, we have to follow by law. The other one's just a good idea, and they don't always work together. So we have to make decisions, and they become much more subjective by being objective when we have to do that, when we have two conflicting guiding documents. So that may or may not answer some of the questions, but it certainly has been a challenge on the way that I make recommendations. And the two questions I always ask to Alex is this in line with the PDO, and is this in line with the comp plan? And usually, yes, it's in line with the PDO. No, it's not in line with the comp plan. I think that's what we're ultimately trying to address here. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Are you back with us, John?
I am. I got Paul's comments there too.
Uh,
Are there any other questions coming from the planning board on, well, anything at this point? Otherwise, move on.
We did not have any comments about small area plan or the moratorium, but I think we just sort of went back to Paul. His hand was up before you started, so we can go back to that. If there's anyone who has questions about either the small area plan, David?
Yeah, I just want to second what Paul was saying. There's just a tension between the PDO right now and the comp plan. Seems like the PDO is allowing plenty that is incoherent with the comp plan. So if we want to get the comp plan life, it's got to come from the PDO, because as long as the PDO is in place and people are adhering to it and doing what they're supposed to by that, then, you know, their projects go through. That's why I think the moratorium is important. It's all more important to get work done with the PDO during that time to kind of settle out those issues and kind of help hopefully cure some of that tension.
Good point. Anyone else?
Okay.
Aaron, you want to comment on that?
No, I think what Paul and David said is correct. We really, from a regulatory standpoint, we have to enforce the provisions of the PDO. The comp plan provides that guide. What the PDO is really you're supposed to implement your comp plan through your PDO. And right now we've got a PDO that's circa 2005, 2014. So we've got a new comprehensive plan with a new set of ideals and visions and goals. And right now the PDO that we have is what's out there, and we need to get at revising our PDO, and we do have that provision or that recommendation to do a comprehensive update to the PDO, and that is in our long range plan, our SOP. But we also, if you look at that matrix that we had included, the comp plan matrix where planning and zoning is going to be a partner, there are various items in there that are, you know, one-offs that are helping that we can work on as a planning and zoning board, that we can work on to implement that are PDO related. There are things in there like, and I'll just raise this, I'm not saying we should take this on right now, reevaluate the need for minimum square footage. There's conservation-based subdivisions. There's a number of things in that matrix that are PDO related that we could probably work on right now. Now, if you look in that matrix, there's a time frame, there's an importance, there's a cost. So there's, you know, and then you look on the right side, it's level of effort. Some are easy. If we want to go from 4 to 6-story buildings in a hospital district, that's a relatively easy PDO update to write. Creating a conservation-based subdivision requirement, that is a more complicated one. So part of us creating this matrix, part of what we'll have on that matrix is the level of effort required to implement it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, raise my hand.
Can we move along, Kevin, or do you have a thought there? Sorry.
I wanted to comment that part of the small area plan is some things we're requiring of them to take baby steps towards that goal. Would you agree with that, Darren?
Yes. The small area plans will help us in great detail.
An extra piece in the small area plan to give us a jump start.
Yes.
And I just thought that was important to inform you guys. But
yeah, I think we added on the form-based code, Kevin, at the end of that contract, the form-based code for both those areas. I think that, you know, those two form-based codes will start to square away those two areas, and some of those concepts that are included in that form-based code, we'll be able to springboard that to other areas of the community, maybe into the OP area, maybe in the hospital district. We'll just have to see what those look like when they get developed.
Okay. All right. might just ask, before we move on to point 5 here, Lydia, did you have any comment on this overall discussion about review, and then maybe Jane as well, and then we'll move along. But Lydia, did you have a point to make? If not, we'll go.
I might save it till later. I mean, there's so many things I'm hearing and I'm putting pieces together in my head. I'm really, really impressed with the talent that's on this board. You know, I wondered, what expectations did you have when you came on planning and zoning? Were you planning on working 40 hours a week? Were you planning? But you know, I'm thrilled that you're all here together talking about how we can make this better for you. That's my only comment.
Good. Jane, any follow-on points to item number 4 here? Jane?
Hi, sorry.
Go ahead, and then we'll go.
Well, I just can't find my mute thing. So I'm stabbing all over my. But as Lydia was saying, this has been surprise after surprise after surprise all throughout the meeting of all the interesting ideas and insights that we're hearing from the Planning and Zoning Board. I'm just so glad we have this idea to get together and talk to each other. What a concept. It's great.
All right. Let's move on to really there's only one basic item yet to talk about here, item number 5. And this had to do with the whole selection process of how council received and approved members of the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment over the years. I was never happy, and I think other council members were not as well, when the council was faced with receiving an applicant for recommendation and getting information on that applicant all in one meeting and being asked to approve someone they didn't know. And so a few months ago, I was talking to Cindy about this. I think Jules and I had some conversations, other council members as well, of course. And we kind of came to an idea a few months ago that we'd like to know a meeting or two in advance of candidates and their backgrounds that are going to be recommended, so that council members could have a chance to meet people or certainly say their resume and be more familiar with them, rather than just approving someone who we didn't know. And the other side of that is we weren't giving a chance for the candidates themselves, and some of you were a part of this, to know the council and to meet with us before the selection process was completed. So informally, I guess a few months ago, we asked that candidates be shown to us, and we'd have a chance to meet them a few months or a few weeks in advance of the appointment meeting. And I think that's working well. Now, as a part of that, it just seemed that maybe we should just confirm other parts of the selection process and maybe how we go forward in involving the planning board itself and the council on these applications. So we have a selection committee. It's the village manager, it's the head of the planning department, and the chair of the planning and zoning board. None of this is officially spelled out in code, so it's important to endorse this or maybe get it into the code at one point. And the suggestion that Cindy and I've talked about, which is that whenever possible, and I know timeframes differ from time to time on this, but whenever possible, that the top 2 or 3 candidates that might be under consideration, the information about them be circulated to the council before the appointment meeting of whomever the selection committee is going to recommend. Then we have an idea of who we're talking to, what kind of talent they have, how we might use them on the planning board, maybe use them in other areas. So that's a concept that we're working on. And Cindy, you may have some further comments on that right now.
I would also like for the planning and zoning board members to have an idea of the new members once they're selected. You know, just, I don't know that you would have an opportunity to meet them, but at least see their resume and understand who it is and provide some feedback on it, which that hasn't happened in the past. And I don't know if there's a reason why, but I think that would be helpful as well.
The other piece of this, and you have to have questions. The other piece of this is appointments to the Board of Adjustment. And the way the code reads, at least to some of us, it is that the Village Council is to approve the 5 primary members of the Board of Adjustment. But that's not the process that's been followed over the past few years for whatever reasons. And so Mike Newman, in some conversations with Jeff earlier today, has said he thinks the current process is okay, or that it's fine. I wanted to have a conversation with him, and I know Jules has been wanting to do that for some time. And Jules, my reason to raise this point tonight is also that I think next week you and I could arrange a telephone call with Mike to see what his reasoning is and how this should work out, and maybe there's a change to the code that needs to be provided. But we can do that next week, Jules, if that's okay with you. So
I'm happy to meet with both you and Mike. However, I also think the way we're doing it is fine. I'm a little confused as to exactly where the push comes to change the process. But I'm happy to meet and talk.
the only push, if it's for me or maybe from others, Jules, is that the way I read the code, it says the village council will appoint the 5 members of the Board of Adjustment.
And as I shared with you, the way I read the code, I'm sorry, did I cut you off or did you freeze?
No, go ahead. You're a lawyer too. Go ahead.
Okay, no, and the way I read the code, the council does appoint the 9 members of P&Z, which at the same time, every member of P&Z is a member of Board of Adjustment. So you have done that appointing, and historically, it's been the practice of the Board of Adjustment then to elect amongst themselves the 5 permanent members. So I see it as being statutorily compliant. If the council as a body wants to change their practice, of course, that's the purview of council. However, as an administrative lawyer, it's my feeling that when a body changes its practice, it should do so in a set procedure and by vote, not by administrative fiat.
Exactly right. And that's why I want to talk to Mike about how he defines alternate members, primary members, how that works within the code as it is now. I don't understand that correctly, perhaps. And so that's the reason to take it forward. And the council has different views on this, and we as a group may or may not want to make any change. But at least I think we can make it a little clearer compared to what the code says and what practice is. And that's the reason to do that. So we'll try to sort that out
Absolutely.
as early as next week.
Can I make an observation on that?
Please, Jeff.
And I think this kind of dovetails on what you just said, John. I mean, this whole question about whether or not what's going on right now is compliance with the code is really not the point. I mean, the point is, what does the council want to do? If the council's happy doing what you're doing right now, it's in your power to, if the code needs to be changed in order to make that right, then you can do that. Mike says that what we're doing right now is acceptable given the language in the code, but if it wasn't, you can change it. Conversely, if you wanted to do something different, then we would look at the code, and if the code wasn't appropriate to make that happen, then you would have the power to change the code. So sure. I think that the question is, what do you want to do? And whether or not what we're doing right now is in compliance with the code is not really relevant.
Well, again, I'd like to get some definition from Mike on that, and your point's well taken, Jeff. Understood. It's a council decision. You may make no change whatsoever. I just want to make sure at least I understand how Mike reads that, so it's to my better understanding in the future.
John?
Cindy, Jeff, Judy, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just would want to try and understand what people think is broken. There's the point that, Jeff is making is absolutely right. Is the language appropriate to what we're doing today? And if there's a feeling that needs to be changed, what do we think is broken and what are we fixing? So need clarity on that.
Good point. Good point.
I don't know the answer to that.
Go ahead, Kevin. Yeah.
I don't know what's broken. I don't think it is. So I'm just saying, I don't think it is.
Okay. All All right, we'll work on that and other follow-up points here from the earlier discussion. The last point in the agenda had to do with the use of volunteers. We've talked a bit about that already, I think, in the some of the other points that came up on committees and work sessions and that sort of thing. And the other, I guess the other point I would make on that, which came up somewhat in the earlier discussions, is that if we can find a way to use some of these individuals who put their names in for potential appointment or to be considered for appointment, it does give staff, council, planning board members an opportunity to get to know people a little better than maybe sometimes we've been able to in the past in preparation for working as an appointee into the future. And so it's just, again, trying to use resources and make a plan for development of prospective appointees and to use resources that are available to us, as I've said. At this point, we're right down at about at 5:30 or so. I'd like to ask my council members if they would like to make any other comments and takeaways from today's meeting. Can I start with Kevin, and then we'll go to Lydia and over to Jane and Judy. Kevin?
Thoroughly impressed. I feel like we almost don't need a bench. Looks like we got all these so exciting people. But what I wanted to say is we're trying to take some constructive criticism and turn it into a good outcome that we got from the Baldridge process, and we need to make you more inclusive and feel anything. I'd love anybody to, you could call me on what you think we need to do. And then I want to add something. I think that we're judging everything. I think there should be a process where the council gets judged by our volunteer staff. You know, I almost feel like it should go the other way, where we talked about it lightly, Natalie, that we didn't have a process to grade ourselves. I think the ultimate in understanding that we are a team is I think they should, or all these volunteer boards should judge what we're doing and in this process, because I think there's a weakness there. We have no process to judge what a job we're doing. And so I wanted to throw that at you. That's how cohesive we want to change into a systematic approach. And I think that really says a lot. That's it.
Lydia.
Thanks, John. You know, Cindy, when you enumerated all the experience that's on this board, and I'm looking at all the thumbnail pictures and I'm going, that's a lot of experience out there. So again, I thank you for volunteering to do this. And a lot of ideas have been thrown out there today. So I just encourage you guys, as you walk away, think on your own, which I'm pretty sure you probably do, but think freely about what we've talked about. If you've got more ideas, go to Cindy. Like Kevin said, come to him, go to staff, because you guys, there's so much potential there. And I want to make sure we tap into it and use it to the full extent possible to benefit Pinehurst.
Thank you, Lydia. Jane?
Again, thank you all for your enthusiasm, for your thoughtfulness, for your participation. And it's been really wonderful to hear all the comments, all the ideas and perspectives. It's such a marvelous resource we have in this board, far more than I had realized, and look forward to working with you going forward. Thank you.
Judy.
Thanks, John, and thanks to everybody for your participation today and hearing from each of you in your own different ways. I think it's important that we have a broader perspective and awareness of each other, but we are separate but equal functions. And that arm's length relationship, I think, is important to maintain. And we want everybody's original thinking and creative thinking on the conundrum that we all face, the difference between the PDO and the comp plan. And and how we can help navigate that in the future is definitely going to be the work of all these bodies. So thank you for your commitment to Pinehurst.
Good. Cindy, I hope there's other questions and comments from your board members that they would make at this time. Cindy, are you muted?
You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you to the council members for all your kind words and your support and for pulling together this meeting. And let me start with Paul, and I'll go through all the members and they can see if they have their comments for the end here. Paul, you want to start?
Just thanks for everybody's time. I've got no further comments. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Paul. Sonia?
You're muted.
I got it. Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for letting us have some input, and I hope we can move forward with a great relationship working together.
Thank you, Sonia. Philip?
No, very constructive. I know I didn't say much. I tend to sit back and kind of get a feel for the room and learn personalities before I put my foot in my mouth. But great to see everybody. And I think something like this, maybe once a year or twice a year, would be very beneficial. I don't know how everybody feels about that, but I certainly enjoy getting together. I think it would be constructive.
Thank you, Philip. Jeremy?
Of course, thank you. Thank you. Whenever I'm involved with the PNC, I'm always very thoughtful of my efforts. Are they helpful to you as a council? And are the things that I'm doing aligned with your direction? And when we send up an application to you, did we do our job and give you some good information? So also, I knew very much what I signed up for. I like to be tasked with work. I think I've asked Cindy a couple of times, hey, use me, direct me, task me. And, that's kind of what I like to do. So feel free, give me tasks and we'll go at them. Thank you very much.
Be careful what you ask for, Jeremy.
I know, right?
Okay, David?
Yeah, any tasks that you want to send my way, I'm happy to give them to Jeremy at this point. There's just not too much time at home right now. Thank you all for the opportunity to kind of give some feedback, and I think it'll be productive moving forward, kind of sharing these ideas and just kind of growing this thing together. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Julia?
I'll reiterate the thanks for the meeting. I think my first term on P&Z, I didn't even know we were allowed to speak to council. So I'm delighted to have not just we're allowed to speak to you, but that you want us to speak to you and you want to listen to what we have to say. So I appreciate the collaborative spirit in which this meeting and opportunity is offered. And I look forward to working more closely with you all over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Matt?
Thanks as well for the meeting. And of course, I guess I'm one of the recipients of the improved onboarding experience. So I feel like I did get some good conversation time with most of the council and as well, certainly with staff, and appreciated the time with Jeff Batten and of course with Alex, but going through the full picture of the village and our roles. So I feel like I'm set up for success and I'm ready to roll the sleeves up and see what we can do.
Thank you, Matt. Jack?
I thought it was useful to get together. Thank you, John, Cindy, and Jeff for putting this together. I think that I'll reiterate what Philip said. I think more frequent meetings would be useful. And the reason being is that when we have a meeting, follow-on meetings, we can probably be very specific about issues rather than just talk about, process. So we can probably dig into some things that will probably be very useful for everyone. So I think it's useful to do it. So I recommend we do it every so often. I don't know there's a real schedule, but whenever it makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. And I also want to thank Darren and Alex. I was onboarded about the same time that Julia was, and we've never had the staff support nor the council support that we have this year. And it just really makes a difference and makes us feel like we're part of the process. So thank you all so much. And yes, I vote for us doing this more often as well. So, John? Oops, looks like he locked up. So if there, does anyone have anything else to say, or should we just adjourn for the evening?
I just wanted to say that you guys will have an impact on the future of Pinehurst because you're going to be part of developing a system. That means long after you're gone, you're going to be making an impact. So we are you guys are going to be pioneering a systematic approach. So I don't know. I just think it's kind of cool that
As you are, Kevin.
This group.
You are too.
This group is going to be pioneering now. You know, what that system looks like with staff. And I just think that means you're going to have to be long after you're gone on this. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If there's nothing else, I say we adjourn for the evening, and very productive. I think we can move forward with this. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Good evening.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.